In 1984, inside a classified U.S. government program, a remote viewer sat down to begin what should have been a routine session. He was handed a sealed envelope and told not to open it. He was asked to describe a place based only on a set of coordinates. What he saw wasn't on Earth at all. It was Mars, but not the Mars we know today. He was looking at Mars over 1 million years ago. Ancient cities, giant pyramids, thin, robed beings waiting for something to return. And as the session went on, it became clear that this wasn't just remote viewing. This was time travel through consciousness. What he saw might change how we think about human history and where we really came from. Hi, and welcome back to Wicked Mysterious, or if this is your first time here, welcome. If this is not your first time, thank you so much for your continued support. My name is Danny, and here we explore all kinds of mysteries from aliens to paranormal stories to unexplained phenomena. So if you're into this kind of thing, check out my guide to what they don't want you to know about consciousness. It's a free ebook and it's in the description box below. I am giving away a free 30-minute reading by raffle, and you're automatically entered just by downloading this guide. Channel memberships also help keep episodes like this possible, and you'll get some extra perks in return. So, with all that out of the way, let's get to it. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the strangest, most intriguing declassified documents the CIA has ever released. We're going to read the transcript itself. Every line is public, so you can definitely read it for yourself in the CIA's CREST archive. And then we'll talk about why the government was experimenting with psychic spies in the first place, what this Mars session actually said, and how it ties into the bigger, weirder story of Project Looking Glass, time travel through consciousness, and the possibility of an ancient Martian exodus. So let's begin here in the middle of a mystery. When you picture the CIA during the 1980s, you probably imagine dead drops, Cold War intrigue, maybe. But at the same time, behind closed doors, another kind of intelligence experiment was underway. It was called remote viewing. This was the attempt to gather information about a distant or hidden target using only the mind. This concept started with researchers like Ingo Swann, Russell Targ, and Harold Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute in California. They ran experiments where viewers were given random coordinates and asked to sketch what they saw. Sometimes they produced eerily accurate details. The CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency took notice. If the Soviets were doing it, and declassified memos show that they were funding similar research, then the US couldn't afford to fall behind. By the early 1980s, the program had been formalized under the umbrella name Stargate. Soldiers and civilians were trained to see across distances, to describe foreign bases, submarines, even encrypted documents. Publicly, the CIA would later say that the program was inconclusive and shut it down. But privately, many of the people involved remained convinced that it worked. One of those people was Joseph McGonigal. He was a retired Army warrant officer awarded the Legion of Merit for his work in intelligence. McGonigal would later state publicly that he was indeed the secret viewer in the 1984 Mars session. The CIA hasn't confirmed this, but the timeline and his own accounts, like in books such as Mind Trek, make the connection compelling. And he also mentioned this in a 1995 interview. So that brings us back to the sealed envelope. On May 22nd, 1984, a monitor, who was the person guiding the session, handed the viewer a sealed envelope. The viewer is instructed, do not open this envelope until the session is complete. Inside, there are target coordinates and cryptic instructions. The planet Mars, the time of interest approximately 1 million years BC. But the viewer didn't know that yet. He was simply told, at the time indicated in the envelope, describe what you see at the given coordinates. And what he begins to describe doesn't sound like Earth at all. He sees what he called a pyramid-formed structure sitting in a large depression. He senses a soft, yellowish sky, high winds, blowing dust, and as he moves around, he finds, quote, very large flat surfaces and smooth walls. He mentions tall things like obelisks. He perceives shadows of people, very tall, thin beings. The monitor asks if these people are alive. The viewer says, they're ancient people, they're dying, it's past their time or age. He senses that they're looking for a way to survive but can't leave yet. They're waiting for someone or something to return. These are all quotes from the CIA document. The transcript is 10 pages long and it contains moments of interference. The viewer saying it's breaking up, fragmented pieces, a lot of static on the line, as if this is a dispatch or tuning a radio to a distant station. Only after the session ends does he open the envelope and discover he's been looking at Mars 1 million years in the past. All right. So I'm going to actually read this document and I will put the link for it in the description if you would like to read it yourself, but I'll show you here anyway. So this is on the CIA website. This was approved for release August 8th, 2000, and it's simply called Mars Exploration, dated May 22nd, 1984. It says method of site acquisition, sealed envelope coupled with geographic coordinates. The sealed envelope was given to the subject immediately prior to the interview. The envelope was not opened until after the interview. In the envelope was a 3x5 card with the following information. The planet Mars, time of interest approximately 1 million years BC. Selected geographic coordinates provided by the parties requesting the information were verbally given to the subject during the interview. So here's the transcript. Okay, so the monitor says, all right, now using the information in the envelope I've provided, exclusively focusing your attention now, using the information in the envelope, focus on 40.89 degrees north, 9.55 degrees west. The subject says, I want to say it looks like, I don't know, sort of looks like it's got an obelisk view of a pyramid or a pyramid form. It's very high and it's kind of sitting in a large, depressed area. It's yellowish, ochre colored. Then the monitor says, all right, move in time to the time indicated in the envelope I've provided you and describe what's happening. The subject says, I'm tracking severe clouds, more like a dust storm. It's a geologic problem. It seems to be like, just a minute. I've got to iron this out. It's really weird. The monitor says, just report your raw perceptions at this time. You're still early in the session. The subject says, I'm looking at an after effect of a major geologic problem. Then the monitor directs him to go back to the time before this geologic problem. The subject says, total difference. It's before there's, I don't know, oh hell, it's like mountains of dirt appear and then disappear when you go before. Then the monitor directs him to go back to the time before this. See large flat surfaces, very smooth angles, walls. They're really large though. I mean, they're megalithic. I'm seeing, it's like a perception of a shadow of people, very tall, thin. It's only of shadow. It's as if they were there and they're not there anymore. And the monitor directs him to go back to a period of time when they were there. And the subject says, it's like I get a lot of static on the line and everything, it's breaking up all the time, just very fragmentary pieces. I just keep seeing very large people. They appear tall and thin, but they're very large, wearing some kind of strange clothes. The monitor says, hold on to this time period. And in this time period, I want you to move through your physical location in space to another physical location. But in this time period, move now to 46.45 degrees north, 353.22 degrees east. The subject reports deep inside of a cavern, not a cavern, more like a canyon. I'm looking up to the sides of a steep wall that seem to go on forever. And there's like a structure with it's like the wall of a canyon itself has been carved. Again, I'm getting very large structures. No intricacies, huge sections of smooth stone. The monitor then asks if the structures have insides and outsides, and the subject says, yes, it's like a rabbit warren. Corners of rooms, they're really huge. I don't feel like I'm standing in one. It's just really huge. The perception is that the ceiling is very high. The walls are very wide. Then the monitor says in real time plus 22 minutes, yes, that would be correct. All right, I'd like to move now to another location nearby. All right, move from this point in time to 45.86 degrees north, 354.1 degrees east. The subject says they have appears to be at the end of a very large road, and there's a marker thing that's very large, and I keep getting the Washington Monument overlay. It's like an obelisk. And the monitor then directs him to move to another point, 35.26 degrees north, 213.24 degrees east. The subject reports, it's like I'm in the middle of a huge circular basin of the range of mountains almost all the way around. Very ragged mountains, very tall. The basin is very, very, very large. Scale seems to be off or something. It's just really big. Everything's really big. The subject said, I see just a right angle corner to something, but that's all. I don't really see anything else. The monitor then directs him to yet another point, 36.4 degrees north, 213.09 degrees east. The subject reports the cluster of squares up and down. It's like you want to make them square anyway. They're almost flush with the ground, and it's like they're connected. Something very white or reflects light. The monitor then asks him, what's your position of observation as you look at this thing that reflects the light? He said, I'm a mid oblique left angle. Sun is weird. So the monitor then says, look back down at the ground now. We're going to move just a little bit from this place, just a little bit. 34.57 degrees north, 212.22 degrees east. This is very close by. Move over there now. The subject says, it's like I can just perceive like a radiating pattern of some kind. It's like really strange intersecting kind of roads that are dug into valleys, where the road is just a little below the edge. And the monitor asks, tell me about the shapes of these things. He says, they're real neat channels cut. They're very deep. It's like the road went down. Then they go back and forth a little bit with the monitor saying, okay, I've noticed that electrically you've nulled out a little bit, and I want you to stay deep and recapture your focus here. And the subject explains that it's hard. It seems like it's very sporadic. And then the monitor reminds him that it's very important that he remains focused. He wants him to view something a considerable distance away. So hold the focus in time and remember the time you had before. Move to 15 degrees north, 198 degrees east. The subject says, see the intersecting, whatever these are, an aqueduct type thing? These are rounded at the bottom, carved channels like road beds. See pointed tops of something on the horizon. Even the horizon looks funny and weird. It's like different. Misty, like it's really far away, very vague. And he says, okay, another movement now to 80 degrees south, 64 degrees east. He says, I see pyramids. I can't tell if it's overlay or not because they're different. Okay, do these pyramids have insides and outsides? I got both. They're huge. It's really interesting perception I'm getting. Then, interestingly, the monitor says, I think he's losing his ability to move accurately, but he's attracted to things that are interesting. So we're going to go with his own. We're going to let him go ahead and explore what seems to be interesting to him rather than move on the targets indicated here. The subject says it's filtered from storms or something. They're like shelters from storms. They're designed for that. And then the monitor says to go inside one and tell what he sees. He says different chambers, but they're almost stripped out of kind of furnishings or anything. It's like strictly functional place for sleeping, or that's not a good word, hibernations of some form. I can't get real raw inputs. Storms, a savage storm, and sleeping through storms. The monitor says, tell me about the ones who sleep through the storms. Very tall again, very large people, but they're thin. They look thin because of their height, and they dress like, oh hell, it's like a real light silk, but it's not a flowing type of clothing. It's like cut to fit. The monitor says, move close to one of them and ask them to tell you about themselves. He says, they're ancient people. They're dying. It's past their time or age. They're very philosophic about it. They're looking for a way to survive, and they just can't. They can't seem to get their way out. They can't seem to find their way out. So they're hanging on while they look or wait for something to return or something coming with the answer. There evidently was a group or a party of them that went to find a new place to live. It's like I'm getting all kinds of overwhelming input of the corruption of their environment. It's like failing very rapidly, and this group went somewhere, like a long way, to find another place to live. The monitor asks what was the cause of the atmospheric disturbance or the environmental disturbance. He says, I see a picture of it's like a warp in this is difficult. It's like going, let's see. Oh, I get a globe. It's like a globe that goes through a comet's tail or it's through a river or something. It's all very cosmic. It's like space pictures. The monitor says, all right, now before you leave this individual, ask him if there's any way ask him if he knows who you are, and ask him if there's any way you can help him in this present predicament. The viewer says, all I get is that they must just wait. Doesn't know who I am. Think he perceives I'm a hallucination or something. The monitor asks, okay, when the others left, these people are waiting. When the others left, how did they go? He says, I get an impression of, I don't know what the hell it is. It looks like inside of a large boat, very rounded walls and shiny metal. The monitor says, go along with them on their journey and find out where it is they go. He says, I have an impression of a really crazy place with volcanoes and gas pockets and strange plants, very volatile place. It's very much like going from the frying pan into the fire. The difference is that it seems to be a lot of vegetation where the other place did not have it, in a different kind of storm. And then he tells him to come back now to the sound of my voice, to present time, to right now, the 22nd of May, 1984, to the sound of my voice. And that's it. That's the end of the document on the CIA website. So, if you're a skeptic, it's easy to say that this is just his imagination or suggestion. The viewer didn't know he was looking at Mars, but he did know he was in a remote viewing experiment. Perhaps he made it all up. But if you're open to this possibility, which if you're here watching this, I'm sure you are, the implications are staggering. This wasn't just looking at a hidden building on Earth. This was looking at an entire world in another era. It suggests that consciousness might not only travel across space, but also across time. This concept has a name in the parapsychology world called temporal remote viewing. It's been tested in small, unofficial ways, people trying to describe tomorrow's stock market or past events that they shouldn't know, but nothing at the scale of this Mars session. In the public record, this is the clearest example of a government-backed, time-targeted remote viewing experiment. And then there's the content of what he saw. Pyramids, obelisks, tall robed beings, a dying civilization waiting for rescue. It resonates with myths from across hundreds of cultures on Earth, myths of visitors from the sky, cataclysm and exodus, of gods who came and left but promised to return. While the Mars session is fascinating on its own, it's also a doorway into a much bigger story, and that is ancient alien theories, Project Looking Glass, and the idea that our own history may be tied to a species that once called Mars home. The idea that Mars may have once hosted intelligent life isn't new. In fact, long before the CIA transcript ever saw the light of day, scientists and mystics alike were drawn to the red planet for reasons that had nothing to do with rovers or satellites. In the late 1800s, astronomer Percival Lowell believed that he could see canals on Mars, artificial structures etched across the Martian surface. If there were canals, then who built them? Over the decades, that question evolved, not just who, but when. Because Mars, like Earth, is a planet that shows signs of having once been habitable. There's dry riverbeds, polar ice caps, even minerals that form in the presence of water. Scientists totally agree that billions of years ago, Mars was much wetter and possibly able to sustain life, maybe even hospitable. But a million years ago, that's not something NASA typically talks about. Yet that's exactly the time period that the CIA targeted in the remote viewing session. And the civilization the viewer described, it wasn't crude or primitive, it was advanced. It had buildings, structures, and it was also desperate and very familiar. So those beings, tall, thin, robed, The viewer never calls them aliens. He doesn't say the word Martian. He just says very tall, thin people. They're ancient, they're dying, it's past their time. He describes structures that mirror what we might call temples, a pyramid formed structure, obelisks, smooth walls, giant depressions in the land. These are the kind of things we associate with ancient Earth civilizations Egypt, Sumeria, Mesoamerica, civilizations that appeared seemingly out of nowhere with fully formed mathematical and astronomical knowledge, complex stone architecture, and myths of being star beings. I'm not here to tell you that the ancient Egyptians were Martians, but I will say that the parallels are hard to ignore and even harder to just explain them away. So let's take just one example the D&M Pyramid, located in the Cydonia region of Mars. The same area with the infamous face on Mars was photographed by Viking 1 in 1976. The D&M structure, studied and detailed by former NASA consultant Dr. Mark Carlotto and others, appeared to have geometric properties that suggest it may not be entirely natural. The angle, symmetry, and placement all have fueled decades of debate about whether this is an artificial ruin. Interestingly, the original coordinates used in the CIA remote viewing session align closely with that same general region of Cydonia. The viewer didn't know what he was looking at, the coordinates were meaningless to him, but what he described matches eerily well to the kinds of structures seen at those same points on Mars. Whether that's coincidence, unconscious suggestion, or something else, we don't know. But it actually gets weirder. The Law of One Material, which I have and started reading, but it was like really doom and gloom. Call it bias or whatever, but I just couldn't get through it. I really like the positive, optimistic ideas of this stuff. But anyway, in the Law of One Material, this was a series of channeled texts from the 1980s. There's a claim that a Martian civilization destroyed itself in a cataclysm and was later incarnated here on Earth. According to those texts, the beings were warlike, technologically advanced, but spiritually underdeveloped. After their civilization collapsed, a cosmic council, like a higher dimensional entity group, helped transfer their souls to early Earth to continue evolving. Now, compare that to the Mars remote viewing transcript. This was about a dying race, environmental collapse, a mission launched to find another place to survive, beings in hibernation shelters waiting for something to return. It's the same myth, but just told differently. And then there's Zecharia Sitchin, whose controversial Earth Chronicles books propose that the Anunnaki, gods from the sky, came to Earth from a planet called Nibiru. I did do a whole episode on Anunnaki, so I will leave that linked here if you're watching on YouTube. While Sitchin placed Nibiru beyond Pluto, not Mars, the core concept was the same advanced beings fleeing a dying world, intervening in early human development. Sitchin's ideas have been widely criticized by mainstream scholars, but again, with the overlap of the CIA transcript, it's pretty interesting. In all these versions, we find a high civilization in crisis and they need to leave. In the Anunnaki story, they had accidentally destroyed their atmosphere and needed gold to patch it. So that's why they came to Earth and created some kind of slave Anunnaki hybrid to mine the gold. And that's how humanity was supposedly created. Even NASA scientists have asked this question whether Earth could be a lifeboat or not. Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist who worked with NASA, has publicly speculated that Mars shows evidence of a nuclear catastrophe in the distant past. He points to an anomalous isotope like xenon 129 found in the Martian atmosphere, the same isotope used as the signature of nuclear events. Brandenburg has theorized, not as a metaphor but as literal physics, that Mars may have been home to an ancient civilization destroyed by nuclear war. His conclusion was, quote, Mars presents the image of a planet that was once Earth-like but suffered a planetary scale catastrophe, end quote. And this brings us back to the idea of what the CIA saw, or at least attempted to observe, and that maybe it wasn't fantasy. maybe it was a glimpse into something real that actually happened. The CIA transcript never uses the term Project Looking Glass, but in the years since it was declassified, many researchers have pointed to it as an early experiment in what Looking Glass would later become. According to whistleblowers and insiders, Project Looking Glass was a government program designed to peer into the past and future using consciousness, exotic technology, and perhaps even recovered alien artifacts. It allegedly used something called quantum resonance, or field harmonics, to view probable timelines. The technology was said to be so powerful that the project had to eventually be buried due to the uncontrollable nature of what it revealed. Sounds crazy, right? Yeah, but so does remote viewing before the CIA confirmed that they were actually funding it. And so does a psychic describing Mars from a million years ago. And yet, here we are. So, I want to do a whole episode on Looking Glass. I find it fascinating, but whether it was real or simply an evolution of Stargate's remote viewing is up for debate. One thing is certain, this Mars session was way more than about just espionage or psychic spies. It was an attempt to reach across time, not just space, and witness something lost to history. In the Mars session, the technology wasn't a machine. It wasn't a Stargate or a wormhole generator or a rocket. It was a human being, sitting quietly, eyes closed, breathing deeply, and describing what he saw in his mind. The only tool he used was consciousness itself. And that's part of the story that makes people so uncomfortable because we're used to thinking of time travel as something you do with a DeLorean or a Hadron Collider. But what if the real time machine is the human nervous system tuned in just the right way? What if consciousness can resonate like a radio with moments other than just the present, just as easily as it can resonate with locations other than where the body actually is? Remote viewers inside the Stargate program were taught a method called Coordinate Remote Viewing, or CRV. This was developed by Ingo Swann and refined by others. And again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but if this is your first time here and you're interested in this, I do have a full deep dive on Ingo Swann and what he saw when he remote viewed the moon. So, super interesting stuff. But the viewer is given a set of coordinates, latitude and longitude, that reference a target. The idea is that the subconscious locks onto the target designated by the coordinates and pulls information back into the conscious mind. That's the official explanation. Many of the people involved believed something much deeper was happening, that they weren't getting just impressions. They were literally projecting a part of their awareness into another point in space and, in some cases, another point in time. This isn't just woo woo. Ingo Swann himself claimed he'd used remote viewing to describe the rings of Jupiter before the Voyager probes confirmed their existence. Joseph McGonigal has spoken openly about sessions in which he viewed future events that later came true. The government's own contractors published papers on time displacement perception, the notion that psi might operate outside the usual constraints of linear time. So, when the CIA tasked a viewer to describe Mars approximately 1 million years BC, they weren't doing it as just a trick. They were testing whether consciousness could access a real verifiable time coordinate, the past, as if it were still present. And if that's possible, what else might be possible? And this is where the story kind of goes into territory that sounds like science fiction, but actually has a verifiable paper trail. Within parapsychology, there's a debate. Does psi merely perceive what's already there, or can it influence it? In other words, are remote viewers just looking, or are they interacting? Most mainstream scientists would say no, but the evidence for psi is controversial enough. The evidence for retrocausation, or effects reaching back in time, is even more tenuous. But you'll find in the lore of programs like Stargate and the alleged Project Looking Glass a persistent theme. Not only can consciousness view multiple timelines, it may be able to nudge which one becomes real. A former Army remote viewer, Lynn Buchanan, has publicly stated that some sessions were designed to move information, not just see it. Ingo Swann also hinted at psychotronics, which is the combining of human psi and technological amplification. Also, several alleged whistleblowers from Project Looking Glass have described something akin to a quantum feedback loop. You project consciousness into a possible future and then bring information back, altering decisions in the present, which in turn shifts the future. This sounds a lot like manifestation. So there's no declassified CIA documents that confirm this, but the idea was around. A 1983 Army document entitled Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, also called the Gateway Document, explores how altered states of consciousness could be used to access non local information in even different dimensions. This paper is very physics heavy, and it shows the mindset that consciousness is a bridge, reality is a hologram, and time as something that can be traversed rather than simply just endured. So, if we read it in that context, the Mars session is more like a test. If a trained remote viewer can visit Mars 1 million years ago and describe a dying civilization, then maybe the technology is the mind itself. And if the mind is the technology, you don't have to build a looking glass. You are the looking glass. So let's assume for a moment that the Mars session was accurate, that whatever the viewer perceived was a real glimpse into Mars's past. That means we have a record, however imperfect, of an advanced civilization living on a neighboring planet that collapsed 1 million years ago. It means our own species might carry memories, psychic or otherwise, of a time before Earth. This means that our myths of gods from the sky might be distorted recollections of our own ancestors. It also could mean that history might not be a one-way street. If consciousness can sample the past, then it can also sample the future. And if it can sample the future, we can prepare for it. And it can change the present. That's not just a trick, it's a strategic advantage on a planetary scale. Is that what Stargate was really after? Not maps of Soviet missile silos, but maps of time itself? We don't know for sure, but the Mars session sits there in the CIA's archive like a breadcrumb, and we can connect it to a much larger pattern. The official story says that the CIA shut down its remote viewing program in 1995 because it didn't produce actionable intelligence. But once you know about the Mars session, the Gateway document, the Gateway tapes, the theory of Project Looking Glass, it's hard not to wonder whether the public shutdown was just a cover, whether the real breakthroughs moved deeper underground into black projects away from FOIA requests and public oversight. And if consciousness is the true technology, if your mind could be a time machine, then the gatekeepers can't fully lock it away. The same protocols taught to military viewers can be learned by civilians. If this is something you're interested in, I do have a PDF download that you can learn how to remote view on your own, and that is available on my website, which will be linked in the description box below. That is one way if you want to support this channel. It helps me out and helps me continue to be able to make videos like this. Anyway, that's the end of my ad. People all over the world practice remote viewing today. Some experiment with temporal targets, and some claim hits. Some claim visions of future events that later unfold. Whether that's genuine or not, there is a pattern. The frontier is no longer just out in space, it's actually here in your mind. In the end, the viewer of the Mars session wasn't trying to write a science fiction movie. He wasn't looking for fame or notoriety. His name wasn't even attached to the original transcript. He was just doing what he was trained to do, describe what he saw. And what he saw resonates not just because of spaceships or pyramids or robed beings, it's because there's something eerily human about it all. The waiting, the environmental collapse, the loneliness of a species facing extinction and not being able to stop it. And that's the part that got me the most when I first read it. Not the weird stuff or the pyramids or obelisks, but the line, they're just hibernating, waiting for something to return, but they don't know what it is. Sounds a lot like us. We're a species obsessed with the past and terrified of the future. We dig through ancient ruins, we stare up at the sky, we invent stories about how it all ends, but what we really want to know is how it all began. What if that hope is a memory? There's a theory, not a scientific one, but a spiritual one, that memory doesn't come from the brain, it comes from consciousness. And if consciousness exists outside of time, then some of the things we remember might not be from this lifetime or even from this world. You've probably had moments that felt out of place, like a location you've never visited but instantly recognize, a symbol that seems important even though you've never seen it before, or a dream that feels more like a download than a creation of your subconscious. The Mars session makes me wonder, is it possible that our consciousness can remember things from another lifetime? What if those tall robed beings didn't just send scouts into space, but into time or into DNA or dreams? I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wicked Mysterious. If you did, please consider subscribing so that you never miss a mystery. Some of you have reached out asking me for readings. And if you didn't know, I do have a degree in metaphysics and I do have a small spiritual advising practice on the side. So if you're interested in meeting with me, either to get a reading or advising, I am doing 10% off for Wicked Mysterious's third birthday. So you can go over to my website and book a reading between now and Halloween and get 10% off with promo code birthday99. I will see you again next week. And in the meantime, stay mysterious.